You know, one of the Switch's most underrated feature is the ability to be able to use whatever controller you want. For example, if you don't want to use a Switch Pro controller, you can pick up something like this, the 8-bit Do Ultimate Bluetooth controller, and it works perfectly fine. Or another example is, let's say you're trying to get one of those Nintendo Switch Online controllers, such as the N64 controller, and you can't get a hold of that? Well, guess what? You can pick up something like this, the Brawler 64. But before I get into that, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. We are trying to hit 500 subscribers. Every subscriber does count, and also share the channel. If you like what we do, you're definitely going to go ahead and share it. But let's go ahead and talk about the Brawler 64 by Retro Fighters. Retro Fighters created the Brawler 64 that's basically a modern controller, but with the N64 setup. If that doesn't make sense, well, take a look at it. Basically what happens is the Brawler 64 does not have a right thumbstick. Rather, instead of having a right thumbstick, it has the C buttons. You see, when using a Pro controller, for example, on Nintendo Switch Online, the N64 version rather, basically what happens is that right thumbstick becomes your C buttons, and it's kind of very difficult to navigate. For example, if you're playing something like Ocarina of Time and you're trying to swap out between your items that you're utilizing, well, guess what? Good luck, because a lot of times it's very precise, and if you go at an angle, it's going to swap between the wrong item that you want to swap between. But the Retro Fighter Brawler 64 has actual C buttons, so it makes it a lot easier. And the cool thing about the Brawler 64 is that when you actually go ahead and pair it to your Nintendo Switch, it's actually recognized as a N64 controller for Nintendo Switch Online, which is actually pretty cool. You can see it has the same button layout, and the picture that shows up on the screen is actually the N64 controller. Honestly, them coming out with this controller is actually pretty great because it's very hard to get an N64 controller. Not only that, a lot of people just have issues with the N64 controller. It's weird ergonomically, right? It looked like it was designed for somebody that had 3 hands. But, you know, most people don't have 3 hands. I don't think so. I've never met somebody with more than 2 hands. But anyways, it looks like it was designed for somebody who has 3 hands. And the Brawler 64 just makes it more modernized. So you do get your left and right grip. You have your left thumbstick, you know, at the top. You have your D-pad at the bottom. And then you have the A and B buttons lined up like the N64 controller was, as well as the C buttons on top, just like the N64 controllers were. And then of course you have your L and your R, but on the back you would have what would be your ZL and ZR, or in the case of the N64, just your Z buttons. They both will work as Z buttons basically for the most part, except for the right one. The right one does work as ZR, so for example, if you're trying to get to the suspend menu, it basically opens up the suspend menu. But you can also use this controller on PC. Now, utilizing it on PC is not as easy. For example, when I went ahead and paired it, it did get recognized as a Nintendo Switch 64 controller, and then swapped out to just a Switch controller. And RetroArch, when I was trying to play a game, recognized it, but none of my buttons were configured automatically. Like, nothing was working at all. So I went ahead and tried, you know, Project 64. Same issue. I couldn't even get it to be recognized at all on Project 64. So I went ahead and tried out RMG, and RMG actually worked really well. RMG is basically a branch off of Mupen with a little bit more mods, so they're very similar. But anyways, I was able to go ahead and get it to work on RMG, and other than that, it worked perfectly fine. I did have to go ahead and actually set up the controller layout, but once all the buttons were configured for what I wanted them to do in the emulator, everything worked perfectly well. There was what felt like to be a little bit of latency, but I couldn't tell if that's just the Bluetooth adapter I'm using or if that's the controller itself, because when I did try it out on the Nintendo Switch Online or with the Nintendo Switch, I didn't really get that latency. Playing Smash Bros on PC, I really noticed that latency. It was kind of awkward because I would try to jump, but it wouldn't jump. And at the same time, it could also be the way Smash Bros 64 was. Like, it's been a very long time since I played that game, and maybe that latency was just always there. But for me, it just felt really bad. I've never felt something that had that much latency. So I'm gonna go ahead and say maybe it's not the controller, maybe it's just my Bluetooth adapter, maybe it was just, you know, the N64. I have no clue. But for the overall, you know, part of this, it worked perfectly fine. I actually had no issues with the controller working. I was able to try out Mega Man Legends and Bomberman Hero, and it just worked perfectly fine. It felt great. It was nice to have something that has the N64 layout, even though, you know, it can be kind of confusing because like A and B buttons are just kind of like on their own, where the C buttons are kind of on the top. So that can be kind of confusing for some people, but for the most part, it worked very, very well. Now, when it came to Nintendo Switch Online, as you expected, it just worked flawless. Every game that I tried and tested with it worked perfectly fine. Again, it was recognized as an N64 controller, so no issues. One of the other things I did want to mention though is when it came to pairing, I had no clue where to look when it came to pairing this device. It's actually all the way at the bottom on the back. It's a little white button, in the case of the white controller at least, where you will press that in and that will allow it to go into pairing mode. I didn't see that at first. I was looking around like crazy, and it kind of made me go through the actual instruction manual, kind of see where I needed to go ahead and pair, and sure enough, it was right there in the instruction manual. The other thing is they do recommend that you go ahead and charge the controller 2 hours before usage, so just make sure you go ahead and follow the instructions, because I don't want your battery to be ruined or anything like that. But going back to performance on the Nintendo Switch, it worked flawless. Honestly, I can get behind it. It's a lot more comfortable than an N64 controller, so just utilizing it overall just feels a lot more natural. Even if you don't have that right thumbstick, that's fine, because honestly, the N64 didn't have a right thumbstick neither, so it's a lot easier to use with the C buttons versus the right thumbstick. You can actually swap out, and instead of it being in N64 mode, you can go to Switch Pro Controller mode. Really don't recommend that, because like I said earlier, you don't have the right thumbstick, so there's not really many games you can use with it. Maybe 2D games like The Messenger or something like that, where it doesn't utilize the right thumbstick, maybe that would be fine. But other than that, you probably don't want to play something like Tears of the Kingdom with this controller, because I don't think it's going to work out well. Retro Fighters Brawler 64 costs $45, which is actually not bad for the price. And there are 3 different color variations. There is the white, there's the classic N64 look, and they have one that's called blue, but it looks more like green to me. But I mean, I guess it depends on who looks at it, right? But there are 3 different colors you can purchase it. You can get it directly from Retro Fighters website, which I will have a link in the description below. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you're going to pick up a Brawler 64, or do you already have one and do you love it? What are your thoughts on it? And yeah, basically just let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to also follow us over at Twitch. As always, we do stream 3 days out of the week, and every Sunday we have the Random Encounter podcast. My name is James from the Random Encounter, and I'll see you guys next time.